We are just 3 weeks away from the announcement of the Heisman winner. Thanks for watching RedZone and EndZone. I'm Janae Muchmore.
And I'm Griffin Parkrose.
Baker Mayfield has emerged as the clear leader following a win over Oklahoma State 2 weeks ago, but an even bigger win against TCU has put him in the lead following last week.
Yeah, those are two impressive performances. That win against Oklahoma State, he had almost 600 yards of passing. That's just completely unheard of for quarterbacks, even in a quarterback-heavy era where we, produce just ridiculous video game-like numbers. 600 yards is a number that even in video games are going to be pretty hard-pressed to find. He's leading the nation in almost every single major statistical category for quarterbacks as well.
He's number one in passer efficiency with a rating of 202.1, along with passing yards for attempts for 11.9 yards with 72% completion. That's 3 different categories that he's ranked number one in. That's just a couple of reasons this Oklahoma offense has been so successful under him.
And when you take into account that he's also accounted for 36 total touchdowns this year, which ranks 3rd in the nation, he's kind of just blowing the competition out of the water at this point.
He does still lag behind in a couple categories, like Mason Rudolph has him beat, especially in the touchdowns, but I think he's almost guaranteed at this point.
And something that a lot of people talk about is Heisman moments. He had a huge Heisman moment when he completely demolished Oklahoma State's defense. He did the same thing against TCU. He completely destroyed Ohio State early in the season. That's 3 more Heisman moments than Mason Rudolph has. And in an era where headlines grab people's attention and people vote based on headlines, those 3 major headlines, beating Ohio State, beating TCU, beating Oklahoma State, are 3 headlines that are gonna, give him a lot more recognition than I think most people are expecting.
The only thing that may separate him from other quarterback contenders is that he's not as mobile on his feet. But he still has 5 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, he has a little under 300 rushing yards, so he's not Lamar Jackson or Khalil Tate. But he runs when it counts, and he's smart with his runs. He doesn't take unnecessary hits.
We go to Stanford and look at Bryce Love. Are you on the Bryce Love train yet? Because a lot of people are.
He's not a senior. He'll probably be back next year. He's beating out Royce Freeman as far as the best running back in the Pac-12, something that a lot of people didn't expect him to do, especially coming into the season. He's replaced Christian McCaffrey better than anyone expected. He doesn't do kickoff and punt returns, which still has hurt Stanford a little bit, but as a running back, he's almost completely replaced Christian McCaffrey.
Pretty much. He's pretty efficient with the ball. He averages 9 yards per carry, and that's 3rd amongst all players in the league. He's also got 15 rushing touchdowns this season, putting him at 4th in the nation.
He also has 1,622 rushing yards on the season, which is tops amongst everyone in the nation.
He's certainly taken control of the Stanford Cardinal offense, and a lot of people were doubting the ability of them to be successful in the run game, especially with McCaffrey gone.
Yeah, and you can look at McCaffrey now. He's doing amazing things in the NFL, almost more as a slot back than a running back, but just that explosiveness on offense, that's something that they've been able to reproduce in Bryce Love.
And I think maybe McCaffrey really coached up Love as he was heading out the door.
Yeah, that's very, very possible. But from one explosive athlete in the Pac-12 to another explosive athlete in the Pac-12, Khalil Tate has been just completely dominating defenses. Ever since he was named the co-starter against Colorado, he's been averaging over 200 yards rushing a game. He's not the passer we want to see out of a Heisman, especially not at the quarterback position. But when you put up numbers like he's putting up, especially these last 6 weeks, it's hard not to consider him a favorite.
And talk of him has been circulating quite a bit in recent weeks. He put Arizona on the top 25 for a week. They ranked 23rd. But he also set a record again in that game against Colorado. Griffin. He had 321 rushing yards. That's the most single rushing yards for a quarterback.
When you talk about all that competition as a rushing quarterback, to be number one in a single game is pretty incredible, especially for someone who wasn't even the starter at the beginning of the season.
He's been on fire. He also leads the country in rushing yards per attempt with 11.6 yards a carry. He guarantees a first down pretty much any time he touches the ball.
Tate also adds 8 passing touchdowns in only 6 games, and he's 7th in the entire country in rushing yards. And for a quarterback, that's just unheard of.
He's beating Bryce Love in that category, too, who's sitting at 11.
That's just absolutely amazing.
Well, we move on to another quarterback in the ACC, Lamar Jackson for Louisville. He's been kind of overlooked this season after a great season last year. And at the beginning of the season, everyone was wondering if he'd do it again and be the first person since 1974 and 1975 to win it twice after Archie Griffin did.
Yeah, and I don't think this is going to be the year for him. There's a chance he'll be back next year. But it's really weird that no one's talking about him as much. Louisville as a team isn't as good as they were last year. Just not even close. They lost a ton of starters on their defense and on their offense. But statistically, he's pretty close to where he was last year. His yards, he's on track to either meet or exceed in almost every category. He doesn't have quite as many touchdowns. Last year, he averaged a little over 6 touchdowns a game. This year, he's averaging about 5. But it's weird that he's so far low on any list as far as Heisman hopefuls.
When we talk about his success last year, he had quite a bit to add to his resume besides the Heisman. He was also recognized as ACC Offensive Player of the Year and Player of the Year, First Team All-American, won the Maxwell and Walter Camp Awards. Now, he is pretty much on par to be the ACC Offensive Player and possibly Player of the Year again, but is he going to be a talk in this Heisman?
No, especially at the quarterback position, I don't even think he'll be the first team All-American. I'd be surprised if he even makes All-American as a quarterback.
Yeah, definitely. They're 6-4 right now, but going back to the running backs, we have Jonathan Taylor for Wisconsin. The true freshman is on a top 5 team in his first season, and he's played such a pivotal role. He's the 3rd leading rusher in the country with 1,525 yards, and he's on pace to beat Adrian Peterson's record in 2004 for all-time yards gained by a freshman, which is currently held at 1,925. He only needs about 100 more yards per game in order to make that happen.
Which should be really easy with 4 more games, one being the Big Ten Championship and that college football playoff, possibly even a 5th game in the national championship, and him averaging over 150 yards a game. I see no issues for him at all, just completely demolishing Adrian Peterson's freshman record. I see him having a 2,000-yard season, which in today's era is completely unheard of for running backs to do. As a growing player, he has a lot of work to do, not necessarily as a running back, but I think a lot of people recognize that a big reason why he's so successful is their gigantic offensive line. He gets 2, 3, sometimes even 5 yards every single play without even being touched. He's a one-cut back with explosive speed, and that doesn't get you a lot of Heisman moments. He doesn't have a lot of defenders completely falling to the ground trying to get him. He still has amazing stats, and maybe next year or as a junior, but this year I don't think he'll have quite enough to even make it to New York. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to, though.
He's got 12 touchdowns and he's averaging 7 yards per carry. He's doing great, but as you said, I think he may get that invitation, but I don't think it's going to happen for him this year. But he needs to keep his head up because he's had a great year and he's got 3 more years to build on top of it.
And he's on a great team that is going to continue to recruit well, and they're going to continue to be good into the future. They're in the weaker half of the Big Ten, so he'll at least be competing for a Big Ten title year in and year out. And lastly, we have a player who kind of fell off the map, especially these last 3 weeks. He's been pretty mundane, for lack of a better word. Saquon Barkley, he's one of the most dynamic players in all of college football, doing kickoff returns, punt returns, being arguably the best receiving back in all of college football this year, and also a running back. But these last 3 weeks, especially when he went up against Ohio State, he didn't really do much. He had 1 kickoff return, and other than that, he only had about, I think it was around 60 yards of total offense, other than that 1 big kickoff return. The rest of his kickoff returns weren't that amazing. He's been completely held in check.
Despite him disappearing in the talk for the Heisman, he is still in contention for the Paul Herong Award, which recognizes college football's most versatile players. He certainly does still fit that category despite the struggles he's had these last couple weeks, but it's also been defensive issues with them isolating him. Last year, he was the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. He scored 22 touchdowns, but this year he only has 16, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to surpass that number.
No, especially since it doesn't look like they're going to be in the Big Ten championship game. They're definitely not going to be in the college football playoff, which would give him the opportunity for 2 extra games. He probably only has 3 more games, so it's going to be tough for him to get those last 6 touchdowns in 3 games with the way he's been performing. We've seen it a lot in recent years. We've seen someone who, going up through weeks 1 through 8, have completely dominated the Heisman talks. Leonard Fournette comes to mind. He 2 years in a row, first 8-9 weeks of the season, if he didn't win, you would have been completely shocked. And then for whatever reason, they have a few pretty subpar games and someone else comes up and takes it. That seems to be what happened here. And for Shaquan, it's kind of sad to see someone who's so talented and has such a great team around him really underperform these past couple weeks.
He hasn't been as efficient. He's gotten the ball. He's averaging half a yard less than he was last year per carry.
And those Heisman moments, he just doesn't have them against the top teams. That kickoff return against Ohio State is really his only big, prime time moment that he's had all season. Something, when you look at a Baker Mayfield who is currently leading the race, he has time in and time out performed against other top competition, planting the flag. He makes all the headlines. He says a lot of the right things. He gets in the news. He gets the highlights. That's what you need to win the Heisman. It's not just a statistical race. It is the headline. It is almost a popularity contest.
I always hate to speculate here, but I do think Baker Mayfield is definitely going to win this